Snow had a different silence in Moscow. It did not fall like it did in Manila, sudden and loud in tropical downpours, drumming against tin roofs and flooding narrow streets. In Moscow, snow descended like forgiveness. Slow, pale, careful, it softened the sharp edges of the city, covered statues and stairways, and turned the golden domes into lanterns floating in white air. On the night the song traveled from Manila to Moscow, the snow was falling like that, gentle, almost shy. Inside the cathedral near Red Square, candles flickered against centuries-old stone. The choir had just finished a traditional hymn, their voices echoing upward into arches painted with saints and sorrow. The audience was a mix of locals, tourists, and a few invited guests from different countries attending the Winter Cultural Exchange Festival. Among them was a small Filipino delegation, teachers, musicians, and one slight girl in a borrowed white dress, her dark hair braided with tiny sampaguita flowers carefully preserved from home. Her name was Amara Reyes. She was 14. In Manila, Christmas began in September. Lanterns called peril hung from windows long before the air cooled. Carols filled jeepneys and malls. Families saved coins in jars for Noche Buena. It was loud and bright and alive. But Amara's Christmas had always been quieter. Her father had once been a fisherman in Batangas. The sea had taken him one December morning when she was 9. Since then, her mother sold bibingka outside a church in Quiapo, waking before dawn to light charcoal and stir batter while Amara helped wrap banana leaves. It was at that church that Amara first sang. She sang while waiting for customers, while smoke curled into the sky. She sang hymns she heard inside the mass, then pop songs she caught on the radio. People began lingering by the stall longer than necessary. Some dropped coins into a separate jar labeled, "For her dream." Her music teacher, Mrs. Alonzo, heard her one simbang gabi and stood frozen near the back pew, tears slipping unnoticed down her cheeks. Within months, Amara was performing at small school events. A year later, a video of her singing, Pasko na Sinta Ko, beside her mother's stall went viral. It was that video that reached the festival organizers in Moscow. And now, thousands of miles away, she stood backstage in a cathedral that smelled of wax and winter. Her hands were cold, not from the weather, though Moscow's December bit harder than anything Manila had ever known, but from fear. The program listed her simply as Special International Guest, Philippines. The festival coordinator, a tall woman named Irina with silver-framed glasses, knelt beside her. "You sing from here," she said gently, pressing a hand over her own heart. Amara nodded. She didn't speak much Russian, and Irina spoke only basic English. But music had bridged stranger gaps. When her name was announced, there was polite applause. Curious applause. The audience expected perhaps something upbeat, something exotic, something festive from a tropical country known for beaches and smiles. They did not expect the first note. It began almost as a whisper. Not loud, not dramatic, a single line in Tagalog, floating like the first snowflake of the evening. Ang Pasko ay sumapit. Christmas has arrived. The cathedral shifted. Conversation stilled. The acoustics caught her voice and carried it upward, multiplying it until it felt as though invisible singers had joined her. She sang of longing. She sang of empty chairs at dinner tables. She sang of children waiting for fathers who would not come home. Her voice was not powerful in the way competition shows often celebrated. It did not belt. It did not show off. It trembled, and that trembling broke something open. In the third row sat Sergei Petrov, a retired history professor who had lost his wife the previous winter. Christmas had been her favorite holiday. She used to insist on placing ornaments even when her hands shook from illness. He had not planned to attend the festival. His daughter had bought the ticket, saying he needed to be around life. When Amara reached the chorus, something in her tone, some fragile, stubborn hope, made Sergei close his eyes. He remembered his wife humming in the kitchen. He remembered promising her that he would be fine. He was not fine. Across the aisle, a young mother named Anya held her 5-year-old son on her lap. Her husband was stationed near the border and would not be home until spring. The boy had asked that morning why Santa could not bring Papa back. Anya had no answer. When Amara's voice cracked slightly on the word, Livanog, light, Anya felt her composure shatter. Tears slipped down her face before she realized she was crying. The boy looked up at her, confused. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's just beautiful." Backstage, members of the Russian choir stared at one another. They did not understand the words, yet the emotion was unmistakable. Amara moved into the bridge. She switched to English. "This season isn't always bright," she sang softly. "Sometimes it's remembering. Sometimes it's forgiving. Sometimes it's learning to love again." Her accent was gentle, her phrasing careful. But the truth in her voice needed no translation. The snow outside thickened. Inside, hearts unraveled. Amara thought of her father. She saw him as he had been that last morning, laughing, promising to bring home extra fish so they could afford a bigger lantern that year. She remembered the waiting, the neighbors gathering, the way her mother's shoulders collapsed when the boat did not return. For years, Christmas had hurt. But she had learned something in that pain. Singing did not erase grief, but it made room for it. Her final note was barely louder than her first. And then there was silence. Not polite silence. Not confused silence. The kind of silence that happens when a room collectively forgets to breathe. Sergei opened his eyes. Anya pressed her face into her son's hair. Irina backstage covered her mouth with both hands. Then someone stood. No one knew who started it. An old woman near the back perhaps. Or a young student in the balcony. But one by one, people rose. The applause began hesitantly, then grew, then thundered against stone walls that had witnessed wars and revolutions and prayers in darker times. Amara blinked rapidly. She had performed before crowds in Manila. She had sung for fiestas and school competitions. But she had never seen this, an entire cathedral on its feet. Not because she had dazzled them, but because she had reached them. She bowed clumsily. The applause did not stop. Later, in the small reception hall behind the cathedral, strangers approached her. Sergei was among the first. He spoke in Russian at first, his voice shaking. Irina quickly translated. "He says, your song reminded him of his wife. He says thank you for making him feel close to her tonight." Amara felt her throat tighten. She did not know what to say, so she simply took Sergei's hands in hers. "Spasibo," she whispered, one of the few words she had practiced. Anya came next, her son hiding shyly behind her coat. "She says her husband is away," Irina translated. Your song helped her explain to her son that missing someone can also mean loving them very much. The boy stepped forward and handed Amara a small wooden ornament shaped like a snowflake. "For you," he said in careful English. Amara knelt and hugged him. News of the performance spread quickly. A local journalist who had attended the festival posted a short clip online. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times. Comments flooded in, from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, from Vladivostok, from Manila. "Who is this girl? I don't understand the language, but I understand the feeling. This is what Christmas should sound like." Back in Quiapo, Amara's mother watched the video on a borrowed phone, surrounded by neighbors who cheered every time her daughter's face appeared on screen. "She looks so small," someone said. "She sounds so big," another replied. The next evening, the festival organizers asked Amara to perform again, this time outdoors, in a public square illuminated by strings of white lights. The temperature had dropped further. Her breath would be visible in the air. Irina worried about her voice in the cold. But Amara insisted. "If they came," she said softly, "I will sing." The square was packed. People who had seen the video stood shoulder to shoulder with those who had only heard whispers of the Filipino girl whose song could make Russians cry. Amara chose a different piece this time, a medley of Filipino and Russian carols she had practiced with the choir earlier that day. When she began, "Silent Night," in Russian, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Her pronunciation was imperfect, but the effort alone drew smiles. Then she transitioned into a Tagalog verse, her voice rising stronger than before. Snow gathered on her hair. Children reached out to catch flakes on their gloves. Somewhere in the crowd, Sergei and Anya stood again, strangers no longer. They sang along to the parts they knew. As the final chorus swelled, something shifted in the square. It was not just a performance anymore. It was shared. The crowd joined her. Soft at first, then fuller, voices blending across languages. Filipino, Russian, English, different histories, different climates, same longing. After the last note faded, The applause was loud, but it felt different from the cathedral's ovation. That night, the applause felt joyful, hopeful, as if grief had been acknowledged and then gently set down. Amara looked up at the sky. Snow still fell, but she no longer felt cold. In the days that followed, invitations arrived, from local schools, from cultural centers, even from a small television program that wanted to interview her. But the moment that stayed with her happened quietly. On her final afternoon in Moscow, she visited the cathedral one last time. It was nearly empty. Sergei was there, lighting a candle. He noticed her and smiled. This time, no translator was needed. They stood in silence for a while, watching the flame flicker. Sergei tapped his chest and then gestured outward, as if releasing something into the air. Amara understood. Music travels. Grief travels. But so does healing. When she returned to Manila, the city welcomed her with humid air and jeepney horns and the smell of roasting chestnuts. Reporters asked her how it felt to sing in Moscow. She thought of snow on her eyelashes, of a wooden snowflake ornament tucked safely in her bag, of an old professor who had felt close to his wife again. It felt, she said slowly, like Christmas. That year, their small bibingka stall had more customers than ever. Not because of fame alone, but because people wanted to see the girl who had carried their language across continents. Amara sang while her mother flipped rice cakes. Children gathered. Some recorded on their phones. Others simply listened. She noticed something different in her own voice now. It was steadier, not because she no longer missed her father, but because she understood that missing someone could be transformed. On Christmas Eve, as midnight mass bells rang through Quiapo, Amara closed her eyes and sang the same song she had sung in Moscow. Neighbors joined in. Tourists paused. Her mother harmonized softly, and for a moment, Manila felt connected to a snow-covered square thousands of miles away. Somewhere in Moscow, Sergei placed the wooden snowflake ornament on his modest tree. Anya video called her husband and told him about the Filipino girl who had helped her explain love to their son. They did not speak the same language as Amara. They might never meet again. But on that winter night when snow fell like forgiveness, a song had traveled from a smoky church stall in Quiapo to the heart of Russia. It had crossed oceans and histories. It had settled into cracks where sorrow lived. And it had done what Christmas, at its best, has always done. It reminded people that even in the coldest places, warmth can begin with a single voice brave enough to tremble.